Okay, vampires in Iraq. Number 6. 5 hours now. It's gonna be 6 or 7 hours. I have patience. Our other videos we can do shorter. When I first started this project, I thought it was going to be 5 to 10 minutes of video and I was going to be done within a week. After doing a couple 20, 30-minute videos, I thought it was going to be maybe 3 weeks. I still think that it's going to be 3 weeks or so and I'm going to finish within November. But we're giving this set of notes as much time as it needs because I think it's important. CIPRNet, Military Secure Internal Internet System. CID, question marks, Internal Affairs of the Army. It's interesting. Camp Victory is an ornate series of palaces Saddam built around artificial lakes just east of the Baghdad airport. Some came to Iraq thinking they were a part of an American tradition of liberation forces. Advice to an open letter. This is advice given as an open letter to new forces rotating into Iraq. Because remember, because of mission creep, which I keep bringing up, which is telling the soldiers the mission is one thing, but it keeps changing into another mission. That's also how you get stop loss. These other ways that you lie to soldiers and pretty much abuse their trust and faith in your command. So then the soldiers have to educate each other. Like when I haven't served in a combat zone, I just read about it and I have friends, but when you get somewhere, then people tell you how it actually is. This is what they told you from where you're coming from, but we've been here, and so this is how it actually is. So this is an open letter to forces rotating in Iraq from people who served in that area. Every soldier should carry a tourniquet of sufficient length to cut off gushing of blood from a major leg wound. If an enemy fires AK-47 aimlessly, calmly place red dot reticule of the M68 optic device on his chest and kill him with one shot center mast, and the rest will run and not come back. While patrolling, if you see an Iraqi notice you, and then make a phone call, change planned route, and avoid the next major intersection where a planned ambush might be. Let's see. Just 1 second. Lost my place. God damn it. Another captain understands, so this is a quote from someone there. Whenever I saw quotes, stuff that was important that I thought I should remember, because these are direct sources. So my opinion, the people who write these books, their opinion is one thing, but whenever we got direct sources from people out there, this is the most valuable stuff for the actual historic record. This is a captain now. Understand, most people here hate us, want us dead, hate everything we stand for. That's his opinion. Where's that opinion come from? What's George Bush saying on the news? What is his administration saying? Do we hold the politicians accountable when they not only lie to us, but their lies infect the soldiers who are serving out there? Is this captain or his troops, are they better served by lies and propaganda or the truth? Do we make a more efficient soldier by filling his head with propaganda and lies? Most people here hate us, want us dead, hate everything we stand for. What does that even mean? The problem is they have to learn to colonize. That's my own opinion, because these guys don't understand they're a colonizing force. Whether you think we should have an empire or not, I believe it's best executed with open eyes and honestly. So if you're going to be for the American empire, at least have the balls to, tell the truth to those who execute your empire. And we have a history of colonization and empire. We have military strategy textbooks on how to do it. So if you want to be an asshole honestly. Gun truck, big vehicle with a mounted 50 cal. The ambush points are highway overpasses. Tend to attack the last vehicles. The guard guys usually travel in flak vests and t-shirts. Don't pull security when they stop. On turns, most IEDs are placed on the inside turn. so they take wide rights, little details. Complacency is the number one killer of troops. Have a commander or first sergeant give a speech on this. Beyond the wire is outside the base. Each unit has a family readiness group, unpaid support organization of spouses who transmit info. One vents in Iraq. Not sure what I meant with that. One gets in Iraq, but each unit has a family readiness group. So that's maybe that's unpaid support organization of spouses. That's something that always warms my heart in the military, is how much military protects each other. Not having served in combat myself, I still have lifelong friends and brothers, so I can only imagine when you actually go over there, your spouse is your family. One of the reasons why I signed up for USAA, it's one of the best programs you can have to check your credit, and they've always been nothing but nice to me, just because I was in the armed forces once. So I've always really liked that family of soldiers and spouses. It goes deep. German generals mocked the British in World War I as lions led by donkeys. Sounds kind of applicable. I have a lot of respect for our armed forces. I would say that we're the same. Lions led by donkeys. Especially now with the current administration. Army War College. Iraq War created new front and Middle East for Islamic terrorism, diverting attention and resources, not integral to the GWOT, Global War on Terror, but rather a detour from it. This is something I said in the last video, is the military and those who study and store our science of warfare. There is a science on how to kill people. The Army is there to fight and win land wars. That's just what I was a part of. You know, the Marines and the Air Force and the Navy, they all have their own codes and their own traditions. But when I was in the Army, from what I got from it, it's not moral, it's not good or bad. You're there to follow orders and fight and win land wars. We break this down to a science. The Army War College is where we further that science of how to wage war. So they can't afford self-deception. Politicians can. And that's one of the ways that we can maybe earn back the military from the politicians who are deceiving them, is that we're tainting that body of knowledge and science with all of this deception. So even back then, the Army War College had to be honest about what were the facts on the ground. And their honest assessment was the Iraq War created a new front in the Middle East for Islamic terrorism, a new front. And they diverted attention and resources from this global war on terrorism. So even if you buy into George Bush Jr.'s global war on terrorism, which why would they, Army War College? Because if they executed this war so poorly, and they were the architects of this war, they were also the architects of that global war on terrorism, let's go question that as well. But at the very least, I appreciate that they came out and they acknowledged that the fiasco in Iraq, I think it was Fiasco, Fiasco was the book, the name of this book. They at least acknowledged for the historic record that this is bullshit. This right here is why George Bush should have been impeached. If you believe that the global war on terrorism is an existential threat to the United States, our Army War College stated openly, is that a liberal institution? That we created a new front for Islamic terrorism and we diverted our attention and resources. Again, this is how you can say that George Bush Jr. and then Obama created ISIS. They created this new front, they created a new recruiting tool, they diverted our resources, and they allowed an organization like ISIS to develop. This is, if you really believe that there's existential threats to the United States, this is what they are. They're not from without, they're from within. These bureaucrats and politicians who are going against military wisdom and logic. You can attack me personally, ad hominem, whatever you want. I'm just gathering information and then presenting it to you in a unique way. I'm presenting to you my narratives. You know, I'm giving to you my art, but raw. Instead of giving you cookies, I'm giving you flour, I'm giving you sugar, and butter. And I'm saying I didn't have enough time to bake them. If something happens to me, or if I don't have enough, energy to actually execute on all these ideas I had. I want to at least get it out there because I think they're important ideas and I don't hear them anywhere else. And this is also part of my creative process. You go over it, you knead the dough, you let it rise. You put more effort into it, you knead it, you let it rise. So these videos are a passive way of me reviewing these notes. I'd rather review 5 or 6 hours of videos in order to write this book than go back through these notes. These notes, it's a burden intellectually to read through here and think about what I was thinking and allow those emotions to come up and everything. But that's a very good one. That's a very good source. And also the way my mind works, if I see the Army War College said that, then my mind wants to go to all the other military, the science of war institutions. I want to know what they said too. I want to know how they put this down in the historic record, and I want to find those dissenters, because if they said this, I want to talk to the people who created that report. And I want them to, because then argue with them. Don't argue with me, argue with generals whose life and career it's been to study how to execute warfare. And they'll tell you why George Bush Jr. is a less than honorable human being. Marine boot camps indoctrinate recruits into a culture comfortable with killing the enemy. The generals don't shy away from using the word kill and describing what they do. In other words, Marines have colonizing experience. So the way I see Marines differing from the other armed forces is they don't shy away from the reality of the situation, whereas the other armed forces, I think this is also what I experienced when because I was at a base where we had all branches. I was in the Army, but my base had a Navy, Air Force, and Marines, as well as Special Forces, who we would learn languages in 50 to 60 weeks, that they would take a 10 to 12 week bootstrap course, and then they just go out. So those guys, we had all of them walking around. You'd see all branches of forces and even a Green Beret walking down the same streets. The Marines are a little bit tougher. We'd say that the PT goes that the Marines are the hardest at PT, physical training, and then Army, and then the Navy, and then the Air Force, who get to ride stationary bikes just to elevate their heart rate, but they don't have to run around the track. But Marines, out of all the fighting forces, have their physical fitness tests are higher, and you can just extrapolate from that. So they have the higher standards of physical fitness. They probably also have higher standards of aggression. Marine Major General. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. And that's a quote from I think MacArthur or someone. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody that you meet. The first time you blow someone away is not an insignificant event. That said, there are some assholes in the world who just need to be shot. There are hunters and there are victims. By your discipline, cunning, obedience, and alertness, you will decide if you're the hunter or the victim. It's really a hell of a lot of fun. You're going to have a blast out here. I feel sorry for every son of a bitch who doesn't get to serve with you. I come in peace. I didn't bring artillery. But I'm pleading with you, with tears in my eyes. If you fuck with me, I'll kill you all. Can I argue with the mind state of these people? These soldiers are put in a position where it's kill or be killed. I'm arguing with the chain of command who put them there. But once you're in that position, would I be a pacifist if I was in a war zone with a gun in my hands and people shooting at me? I'd probably survive. If I look at my life, overall, I'm a survivor first and foremost. Then I earn myself the space to think critically and be peaceful. But if I was first and foremost a pacifist and I was first and foremost an intellectual, I wouldn't have been able to walk through certain things I walk through. So when it's time to get down, you have to be able to get down. I don't disagree with this type of mentality, but it's a crime against humanity to bring out that animalistic, barbaric nature unnecessarily. This is a nuclear option in our human behavior that, it's like using a nuclear weapon. Are you ever justified in using it? Maybe not. But you keep them to keep yourself safe. Some people, And I do go back and forth on that, where pacifism, pure pacifism, and pure just subservience, and just allow yourself to go with emotion. And if you're ever in a physical confrontation, I don't know, but I understand that I get where this Marine general is coming from, and I can't honestly say which way I would go on that if I was in the same situation. Lieutenant gives advice on Iraqi customs, and the captain adopts them. So this is fictionalized now. My fictional lieutenant would give advice on Iraqi customs, and I guess you know what I just said about that line, which side of it. That's what I was going to play out in this fiction, because the greatest art talks about these moral questions to which there are no definitive answers. Where do you draw the line between militarism and pacifism? Where do you draw the line between self-defense and aggression? And so that was going to play out in this art, because I have these characters who embody different sides of that. Definitely that evil lieutenant colonel and the evil first sergeant embody the pure assholery. And then the Nick and the lieutenant, who are in a little romance, embody not just idealism, but if they're having that romance, that's unprofessional. So now they're embodying a little bit of hypocrisy too. And then the soldiers are going to be the audience that go back and forth, who is, they're the public, they're the conscious that we're fighting over. Which is something I've seen with this Iraq war, is with having someone with such low intestinal fortitude and moral fiber like George Bush Jr., a draft dodger, to have him lead our country, and then now we have Donald Trump, who's another person who with obvious lack of character. Culture comes from the top down. I've seen it in companies too. Misogynistic culture comes from the top down as well. They're pissing in the pool. They're tainting the discussion. These guys are empowering the assholes. There's a lot of people who are looking for guidance, and with a lack of leadership at the top, we're failing those people. The lieutenant gives advice on Iraqi customs. The captain adopts him. The lieutenant reads the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. The night or day after the captain is killed, the first sergeant shaved his mustache. He never grew a full one. He had a long scar on his upper lip. The hair never quite covered it. It's just character development. He doesn't wear sunglasses when... these are the lieutenant saying advice on Iraqi customs, which I drew from these books I was reading. Don't wear sunglasses when interacting with Iraqis, out of respect. Learn a little Arabic, even grow a mustache. And so I guess the first sergeant shaving his mustache is his way of giving up on that. And also the scar that he had on his lip is maybe like a metaphor for the fact that, like, in his character, he could never really be respectful no matter how hard he tried. Just like he couldn't really grow a mustache no matter how hard he tried because of that scar, which maybe, if you really want to go out on a limb, is like a scar in his heart, which he'll never be able to love or understand another human being, blah, blah, blah. Brace for Fridays when Iraqis leave mosques fired up. So they're hearing, like I said, so many people being detained, 8 or 9 out of 10 without intelligence value. They're hearing these stories. People talk, societies talk, cultures talk. Not all of them can shoot at you or join the resistance, but they still talk. So, and then also these religious leaders, if they don't speak to the and frustration of their flock, then they're gonna be seen as weak. So they're firing them up in the mosque. So the advice was to brace for Fridays when they leave the mosque fired up, probably unifying their cultural identity with shared anger about the U.S. occupation. Religious leaders are going to be critical of the coalition publicly. They don't want to appear weak. So there we go. Don't get upset when family members lie to you about a relative committing a crime. They're not trying to cover up. They're trying to save the honor of the family. If you know the facts, let them have their honor. And this is just human nature stuff. Understand that these people, honor is everything. If doing a cordon and knock, these people, that sounds kind of like whitewashing, or what do you call it, a generalization, but to me honor is everything. To certain people, that's why I relate to it, and that's why I read up about Islam. This is after I read about Islam. That was in college when I was in CSUSB. I took a class on Islam. Like most of the classes I took, I didn't attend it and I failed out eventually. But I read the book, and it was a small little book, Islam, A Religion of Life. I had a lot of cognitive dissonance from my Christian upbringing, where I really like raised as thinking it was an inferior religion with a lot of, my parents, there's a lot of good things in their life, a lot of good things in their character, the love and the unity and the loyalty we have. The fact that we always come back together no matter what any of us does, we still accept each other back into the family. But the negative was their ethnocentrism, that, the little jokes about Islam and the not caring so much. Pretty much like the idea of Iraqis, that's their fault for being born an Iraqi. It's not because they're not loving, it's just, cultural bias is a hell of a drug. To feel like you're the chosen one and that everyone other than your group is going to hell. If doing a cordon and knock, try not looking into the house. Do not destroy possessions and furniture. Ask the leader of the house to open rooms and cupboards. If something is found, don't throw the leader to the ground. Give him some honor. Tell him that he needs to explain to his wife and kids he is going with you. So this is basically how to do the good raid as opposed to the bad raid. And I was probably going to show examples of both in the story. We must act as and there are people doing this in Iraq. I remember there were stories that I would read about these people that wanted to look up that seemed to get it, how if we were really who we said we were, this is how we would have conducted these campaigns correctly. And that's where this advice is coming from. We must act as a windbreak behind which a struggling Iraq can get its act together. So that's if we had honorable leaders and honest bureaucrats put in place. That's how we would have executed this. T.E. Lawrence's 27 Articles. So that's the Lawrence of Arabia. I'm not sure if I would really take his advice because I'm pretty sure that was a colonial mission from the beginning, just to divide up the Arab identity into separate controllable parts. Is how I would read that history, but I have to look into it. I just know it generally. I make an opinion from general observations and then I dig into it. A lot of times my opinions are unfounded and I do a 180 completely. But going into something, before I read someone else's stuff, usually I make my own opinion just to have something to contrast it against. And then at the very end I reflect like I'm doing in these videos, reading this, like I'm doing my whole life this year, reflect and decide what I want to keep and what do I have to change. And growth is painful. And that's my advice to anyone else. If you do stuff like this, be patient with yourself, and be free, be okay with taking pauses to make sure that you're actually growing. And if you feel discomfort is that growth. So be patient with that. If you're very uncomfortable, smoke some weed, take a break. Make sure you have good relationships in your life to balance you, because it can be overwhelming at times, challenging your own assumptions or your own words from the past. Some of the times when I've read stuff that I wrote about my father, about the relationships back then, I'm shocked by my candor and my honesty, but it is what it is, and that's why I put it down. One thing I do have in my morality is a word I keep to myself. If I put it down, it's for a reason, and I'm going to be accountable for those words. If I put it down, it's because I put it down for the record. Anything that I didn't want remembered, I didn't write down. If I wrote it down, there's a reason why I wrote it down. By me reading it now, reading it personally, which is one thing, but putting it to these videos for the public domain, it's a whole nother level of radical transparency. But if I wrote it down, it's because I thought it was worth remembering. So I'm keeping that word to that past self by speaking these words and putting all the documents out there for intellectual honesty. The Iraqis aren't the enemy. Don't let the insurgents make you think that. The people are the prize. So this is one way of looking at things. There's only one retirement plan for terrorists. That's one way of looking at things. Have details of place and events ground the Iraq experience in the fall-winter of 2003 But this doesn't have to be concrete, so I'm starting to pick my timeline of when I want my story to happen. The Fiasco is an apologist who idolizes military and whitewashes history. So now this is my judgment of Thomas Ricks himself. Because I'm picking out, what I really love from him is the factual details, which it doesn't matter your ideology. So I love his quotes, I love his military history, I love all of the details that make you feel like you're there in the invasion. But as I read his book, this is my judgment of him as an author, that he's a military apologist, and he has a lot of that accidental empire approach. That's what the British Empire said. We woke up one day and we just ended up with an empire. No, you were a series of systemized, very conscious maneuvers and steps in order to disempower and stop the self-determination of peoples all around the world. And that's the embodiment, that's the definition of evil. You acted against the interest of mankind in general and in specific. In general, in the sense of a brotherhood of man, and in specific in the sense of every single people that you colonized and dehumanized, tortured, raped, murdered, pillaged. You're the low of what we can be as a human species if you're an imperialist, if you're a colonizer. Thomas Ricks doesn't take that approach. He takes the approach that these are all just a bunch of unhappy mistakes. So I put down, he's an apologist who idealizes military, whitewashes history. He wants to frame this as a moral but operationally flawed war. So in the end, we are still moral, which allows just enough space for the war criminals to escape out the back door, doesn't it? And that's why we haven't prosecuted them or held them accountable. Like his view on the Abu Ghraib abuse. So this is me where I take a break just to kind of put down my thoughts of what I think of the author separate from the facts that he's given me. Like his view on the Abu Ghraib abuse, he feels if he brings forth a couple bad pictures but explains the circumstances, things will be okay. Average Iraqi is terrified. He says a mysterious wall person. See, so now I'm trying to get that little girl, the mysterious wall person, to try to explain to Nick and the lieutenant how the average Iraqi feels. So in my fictional drama, I'm really curious as to how close can I bring these two sides? How much understanding can I foster between these people who've been put in a historic crucible? The soldiers in Iraq, I've always felt, are as much the victim as the actual Iraqis themselves. That might sound like a insult to the Iraqis themselves, because the soldiers seem to be in a position of power and the Iraqis are the ones who were committing genocide against. But I feel this is more of a Zen Eastern philosophy thing, that your oppressor is just as much oppressed by their violence as yourself who's being oppressed. Violence creates a relationship between that who is being violent and that who's having the violence committed against them. And this is something that I came to through my love and through trying to understand this girl who had that heroin addiction and other things in my life, is that all of life is a relationship, yin and yang, back and forth of energies. So yes, when someone has violence committed against them, technically they're victimized, and technically they could even lose their life. They could lose limbs, they could lose their peace, or their ability to have a normal consciousness. They can lose, their normality. Victimhood can follow you all your life. Sexual trauma, or trauma against your country and your identity, your national identity, physical trauma. So I'm not belittling that. I'm not saying that the victims of abuse and the victims of violence aren't victims, real victims, and their victimhood takes priority, because justice demands no less than restitution for victims. So we put them front and center in any conception of justice. But those who victimize, if you have a holistic sense of what it means to be human, that they're losing their humanity through victimizing others. And we don't always get the ability to establish justice in the here and now. So if you believe in anything more than the here and now, in a universal spirit and a soul and a higher being, then you have to believe that just because we weren't able to establish justice now doesn't mean that there won't be justice. And so how does that justice get established if we're not the ones who are able to execute it? Well, it gets established through some other spirit, some other afterlife, whatever you think. I've outgrown, I believe, a Christian concept of eternal morality, so I don't subscribe to the fact that I'm not the guy who thinks that those evil people are suffering in hell. That's not how I feel like they get their justice. I feel like they get it here and now, but if it's not through a justice system, or even if it is through a justice system, it's through sacrificing their humanity. And I think if you go and study people who victimized others, unless they're sociopaths, and most people are normal people, and then sociopaths, they walk their own path and then they suffer with their own thing of not being able to experience love and join our brotherhood of humanity. But those people who victimize others, I think that you're sacrificing your humanity when you do that, and that's how you pay the price. Why did I bring that up again? I don't know. That's because when I said that there are killings, rapes, and murders, robberies, they'll make the news. The average Iraqi is terrified, said the mysterious wall person. It was that little girl into whose mouth, writing on the wall, I was going to put the voice of the Iraqis. I was basically going to see how I was going to set the scale, the dramatic scale, as a balance that these soldiers put in this position by the chain of command and our president, who hopefully the historic record, well, it will, because the truth comes out. George Bush will get his proper place in history, as will Barack Obama or anyone else who's executed these wars of aggressions that are unfounded. So the internet has come now, as much as you try to squeeze it, and the truth will come out. And the toothpaste does not go back into the tube. So, and that's why I'm so calm, and that's why, I don't have to go, join some sort of militant group or some protest group or anything else. I'm very calm because I feel like I have the wide, bigger picture of history and of human nature. And what helps me, I think, is a natural proclivity towards spirituality, but also then tapping into deeper spiritual traditions like Zen Buddhism and others that draw that wider view. The first patriarch, I believe, when he came from the west to the east to talk about his form of Buddhism, first went to the monarch, I forgot who it was, the ruler of China at the time, to offer himself as an advisor. And the ruler asked him, well, what do you know? Are you going to advise me? And he says, I'm not sure. He didn't really offer a definitive answer. The monarch wasn't impressed, and they moved on. But I think that's a higher level of thought, is that you're subtle. Some would call it passive-aggressive, but you're just recognizing the larger patterns and trends, and you try not to speak beyond that. And so some people might call that a passivity or ignorance, but these people are wise and that they're masters and they're sages because they always seem to be on top. And obviously that person founded a really great spiritual religious tradition, which I'm sure if you go back, I'm sure that monarch would have loved to have him in his court. But whatever he recognized by that interaction, he didn't press himself too hard. We know this in a lot of other sayings and expressions. Those who speak do not know. You speak and reveal your ignorance. You keep your silence. So usually those who, methinks that the lady protests too much. The loud and boisterous versus the calm and collected. The quietest person in the room is the smartest. All these little sayings. So there's these larger patterns at play, these deeper meanings and truths. That's how I was going to set the stage dramatically here. I was going to create an environment in which I can show that the soldiers acting out the aggression in Iraq are just as much the victim as those that they're aggressing against. This is one of the biggest complaints I have against our modern culture is we seem to have less and less space for these deeper discussions. People want obvious good and obvious bad. And then that's also why we're so attracted to Eastern philosophy and Eastern culture. If you watch an anime movie, that's what I was talking to a friend, that's what's so great about these Studio Ghibli movies or these anime movies, is the bad guy isn't pure bad. The bad guy has some redeeming qualities and good, and usually their bad is out of ignorance, and the community comes together. And if we have a holistic end, it's where the whole society comes together in order to heal. I noticed this in The Lord of the Rings when I read it, and I didn't know why they let, what's his name, that one bad sorcerer. If you read The Hobbits, I'm pretty sure it's in The Hobbits, or maybe it's at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. In the very end, they're going back to the Shire, and there's that one wizard who stood against Gandalf and imprisoned him in the tower and this and that. They let that guy live in the end, and they said that it's okay for him to be an evil in the world and talk is nonsense, but they didn't have retributive justice against them. Our earliest form of, in Western culture, our earliest form of moral drama was the Oresteia trilogy, which is these 3 plays, which we think, I think from what I know about classical Greek drama, which if I have time in my life, it would be nice to study the classics more. We think that the purpose of it was to get away from retributive justice and get people to buy more into a system of laws and the government to establish justice and punishment, as opposed to people having blood feuds, which is a lot of how Arabic culture still is, where if you commit a crime against me or my family, now we have to go and seek vengeance. In order to stop that, you have to invest vengeance into a higher authority, which the state asks to be. The state says, put your trust in us to seek vengeance for you. You know, even if your family member, if your daughter or your son had something happen against them, you as a father or a mother, instead of you being a vigilante, allow the state to seek justice. I would say that that's the definition of civilization. I've been looking over this last year as I think about Shaz Barbaric. Can I defend that? I am Shaz, I am Baric, I am Shaz Barbaric now. So what does barbarism mean, since I'm going to be interpreted by those words, which I'm claiming as my identity? And so I think about, well, it's a contrast against civilization, and I have some real bones to pick with Western civilization and the actions being done in my name as an American, which is supposed to be at the height of Western civilization. So I like those ideas philosophically, and as an artist, creating my identity as a part of my philosophy. All of this stuff is stuff that I've never heard done before. So I feel like I'm creating a new form of living, which is very topical as far as technology goes, because it's my first email I got. Living my truth. I don't feel like I've ever read another philosopher, another artist, another human being, because those first two I'm not yet. I'm aspiring, but I am a human being. I'm not an aspiring human being. I am Shaz. I am this meat sack that's speaking to you right now. All that other stuff is stuff I aspire to do. These are the notes of that stuff. But so I've been wondering about what is civilization, and when I look it up online, I can't get a straight answer. You know, it's agriculture, but then we find these ancient civilizations that might have not been agriculturally based, and we find that the hunter and gatherer communities, which go back as far or farther, maybe 3000 BC, 10,000 BC, some of them say even hundreds of thousands of years ago, had really high standards of living. They were only working a couple hours a week. So they were living, eating better than us, working less than us. We're not going to call them civilized just because they weren't sedentary. And what I read about the Mongols, I love that, because not to be violent or to condone their violence, but Genghis Khan and his tribe of nomads, they created a social identity without creating that agrarian identity. So they're a really great example of civilization not being city-based. And they looked at the city-based people as cattle. They looked at them as animals. They felt like once you committed to that one location geographically, that's why they killed them. One of the reasons why they kill so many people. Chicken or egg question. Did they kill so many people because they thought that the way of living was below them, and so that was their excuse for objectification, that they disgusted them with their way of living in cities? Or did they have to objectify them in order to kill so many? Like, in order to survive, they had to kill so many people and take so much of their things, and so then they created that excuse. Or was that excuse a part of their identity, and then led to them being so violent? Who knows? Necessity is probably the mother of, all They say necessity is the mother of all inventions. It's also the mother of all warfare. Plato says the same thing. Cities expand, cultures expand, so you have to take resources from your neighbors. So warfare is just a natural progression of expansion. Later on, we're going to talk about how, what's his name? A People's History of the United States guy, Howard Zinn, asked, maybe we are at a point technologically and culturally where we can lay down the excuse of expansion as an excuse for war and empire, and we can evolve past that, which, if you believe culture is progressive and that we're progressing to higher and higher evolutions of humanity and consciousness, that's obviously on the path. Every one of our noble leaders have said that. Even if you don't agree with everything about their characters, Benjamin Franklin said that eventually we're going to have to work towards a world government of peace in order to mitigate our solutions through means other than warfare. So every higher level thinker has eventually gotten to that point of pacifism, because it's obviously on our path. It's just a question of whether it's the next step or whether we should really worry about our self-defense first. But the pacifists are the higher level thinkers, and the eternal warfare guys don't even hold a candle to them, because the argument doesn't hold water. JFK has speeches on peace before he died about you have to believe that peace is the eventual progression of humankind. It just doesn't make sense any other way. War is a problem by man, and it can be solved by man. So the people I respect believe that way. But so what was I was bringing this back to civilization. So the definition of civilization I just thought of right here is that vesting an authority other than yourself or your smaller tribe, vesting the society's authority with the power to seek justice. So the opposite of retributive justice. That would be probably a very good definition of civilization, because that allows everything else. It's not the agrarian society, it's not the fact that you either stay in one place or you're nomadic, because Genghis Khan, I think what he created was the largest empire in the history of the world. If you say that's not a civilization, and then the science of bureaucracy that they're able to do, there was a logic and there was a science to how he executed not just his military campaigns, but also how he managed his territories, or else he couldn't have done what he did with the violence aside. He wasn't just a bloodthirsty person. He was also one of the best administrators in history, or else you couldn't have had the Silk Road. He created the internet before the internet. Before, he created a greater connection between different societies than ever existed before. He did it with a mind-boggling amount of bloodshed. So we don't want to do it that way. But so civilization. But what did he do? He said that you had to submit to the rule of the Khan first and foremost. And I think that's an interesting definition of civilization. I don't have the credentials to stake a claim to say that I know what, I can't define civilization. Words are defined by culture and by the group agreeing. But tie that into the Restia trilogy. Now that was also foundational for the concept of buying into society doling out punishment, not individuals. And then how does that tie into this? That was just a rant. That doesn't tie into this. That's why we're on page 23 of 41. But we're getting good ideas. And that's why I read these things this is how my mind works. Is you give yourself, I have nothing but time here. So give myself as much time as I need to read these notes, and whatever comes out of this journey is what's supposed to come out. This is a dialogue. So the average Iraqi is terrified, said the mysterious wall person. There are killings, rapes, murders, robberies. Those don't make the news. No security for Iraqis in daily life. They have no electricity. Look across the river to the CPA, lit up at night, because the CPA has electricity. Frame the issue as you have an immoral system. Vietnam can be an example, but it predates. Certain actors benefit while others pay a varying degree of price. Until the system is dismantled, it will repeat, cause and effect, incentive and response. What are the parts to this system? People don't have to be evil. The system can just reward greed, incompetence, the Peter principle. So this is me showing I have to be objective. It might not be as malicious as I think. Many times in life I thought that there was one evil actor, and you realize that it's just an incentive structure. In insurance they call that a morale hazard. You just have the wrong incentives for bad things to happen, but you never found one actual person holding the bag. But we don't want to leave the door too wide open for that one evil person to escape through a bunch of excuses. George Bush Jr. put J. Paul Bremer in there for a reason. So, and that's where I said when we first started this that either through ignorance or maliciousness, I think both are criminal at this point, based on how much money has been shoveled out of our treasury and how many people have died. And that's why you have such a thing as called criminal, is it criminal ignorance? Criminal negligence. At the very least, George Bush Jr. was criminally negligent. And at the very worst, he was committed treason. The question is, do the people that play roles in the system recognize that it's flawed? So once we put these facts out there, who's going to defend it with the facts in their face? What is a lieutenant's responsibility? Is he a platoon leader? The captain a company leader? How many in a platoon? How many squads? Very vanilla, means routine. A guy gets hit in the chest by an RPG, loses an eye, wakes up and asks, where am I? You're going to Germany, dude. Apparently that's where they ship people in order to, when you get medevaced, you're going to Germany to convalesce. Heavy traffic disappears on highway. American convoy alone. Small arms fire opens up. Bullet knocks helmet off a lieutenant. Eye pops out of socket. Brain begins to bleed and swell. So these are details I'm getting from these books I'm reading. None of these details are from soldiers I talked to. I didn't make it. If I was going to seek those stories, I would probably try to do it in a tactful way, but this book never got to the point where I actually sought out soldier stories. These are ones that other journalists, other authors sought out, and I'm just copying them down. That's like a point, these aren't people's personal stories I'm throwing in here, and they're not stuff that I invented off the top of my head. Boot camp, drill infantry basics. Again, their faces scream the usual routine. Give them back self-respect a little at a time. So you break someone down. I think the point of boot camp was just a high-stress environment. At one point, I stood up and I tried to defend us. We were getting smoked, and I was like, drill sergeant, I don't think they said we were talking when we weren't supposed to talk. And I was like, drill sergeant, and they're like, yeah, Private McNerney or whatever the fuck they called us. I was like, I don't think anyone was talking. They're like, shut the fuck up, or whatever they said. And then someone whispered to me, they're like, dude, it's not about being, it's not about trying to figure out the truth. Like what they say, I forgot what they exactly told him. They're like, they're just gonna smoke us. They're just here to smoke us. They're not, stop talking, man. Stop defending us. I was trying to be like, but drill, but drill sergeant, I don't think anyone was talking, but drill sergeant. Thinking that it was they were misunderstood. It was a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. Boot camp is there to give you shit, to put you in a high-stress environment with minimal sleep, to simulate the combat zone, was my take on it. I learned to shut up and just get through it. Shut up and get through it. Do your job. Phrases. Phrases is slow as molasses in January, green as June grass. Just little phrases. A soldier, any Iraq officer who hasn't been assassinated or targeted is giving info or a soldier says that any Iraqi officer who has been assassinated or targeted is giving info or support to the insurgency. Any Iraqi officer who isn't in bed with the insurgency is likely already dead. This is the cynicism which soon became the reality over there. So 24 pages out of 41. I think 49 minutes right now. We're going to try to at least get to 30, 31 pages today. And then tomorrow I think I can knock out the last 10 pages. If you're going to Vienna, take fucking Vienna. That's Napoleon. A guy who pretty much created modern warfare, I think. They say that, talking about Genghis Khan, I like military history. I don't know the most. I like to study more. All of this stuff takes time. They say that Genghis Khan Well, he only turned back and stopped going into Europe because the Khan died. So he sent out his expeditionary forces, who weren't really reaching any meaningful opposition as they went towards Europe. I think they went down towards modern day Armenia and the Caucasus Mountains over there around Georgia. They weren't really, no one's stopping them. And they would have kept exploring, and they probably would have kept going west, I think. But then the Khan died, and they had to select a new one. And that was Genghis Khan who died, I think. So they had to go back, and that takes a couple years. And then they never really made another wave all the way out. But if they had kept going, the book I read stated that they probably wouldn't have been stopped. The European warfare, in terms of the soldiers and their aptitude, and then also how they conducted the warfare, their technology and their tactics, didn't catch up to Genghis Khan until Napoleon, and that's a gap of about 400 years. So Genghis Khan was about 1400, Napoleon was what, about late 1700s, 1800? The only person that would have been able to stand up against Genghis Khan probably would have been someone like Napoleon. So that's just how far advanced Genghis Khan was in his ability to wage war, from what I've read. It's interesting. They treat the military like toy soldiers, not planning for them to make progress, but just making sure they stick there. There's no incentive to make Iraq safe for Iraqis and go home. Every incentive for a drawn-out conflict that supports our presence there. That's my statement. That's my opinion from reading this. I'm like taking a step back and being like, wow, there's really no incentive for peace, and there's no incentive to execute on the mission, and every incentive to draw this out. Now think about also me having family members coming from military tradition, knowing people who are currently serving over there. How does that make me feel? To feel like the people I care about and the tradition that my family's been involved in, and the tradition I almost stayed in if I wasn't, a disgruntled anti-authoritarian. We're being treated like toy soldiers. That's one of the biggest crimes I think you could commit against your own nation, is to disrespect your armed forces like that. I think there's a contract. There's a contract between a soldier and a nation, and the soldier signs that contract saying that I'm giving up my Bill of Rights, my freedoms, in order to be an instrument of war to defend my nation, which really is them defending their life, them defending their battle buddies, their soldiers to the left and to the right of them on the battlefield, and then them defending their family back home, being as that stopgap, that we believe that this is an existential threat to our nation, and we're going to be out here fighting in Iraq, so we're not in, some bumfuck Indiana fighting. We're fighting the terrorists out there, so we don't have to fight them in America. So that's their contract to the military, is that they're going to give their life for all those reasons. The contract from the country to the soldier is that they're going to not lie to them about the mission, and they're not going to put them in harm's way without just cause. And that contract's been broken. We should look at our country and the people who prosecuted this war the same way you would look at someone who goes AWOL. A person who went AWOL is facing treason, and you can be executed for treason. They don't do it. These guys go to jail maybe. Sometimes they even get a slap on the wrist. But when you break that contract, you signed up to put your life on the line for your country for all those reasons. We can't have a defensive armed force without that. So when you break that contract, it's a very serious thing. I took my trouble seriously. It might not seem like I did, but I did. I took my enlistment seriously. I started to lose faith in my chain of command for different reasons. And it's lucky I did, because now I have a voice to speak. And that's why I'm speaking. This is a moral obligation to speak up for soldiers who can't speak like this. I am emotionally invested just reading this stuff. So imagine if you went through this. If I served, I wouldn't be able to speak this dispassionately about this. I'd be having flashbacks. I'm already getting angry just thinking about this stuff, just because I know people, and because of my cousin whose life was irreparably damaged. A kid that I grew up with since I was a child, thinking that he was my cooler skateboarding cousin from Newport Beach, and I owe him something. I believe very much, an Arab form of honesty and honor. Me and my brother against a cousin, me and my cousin against a stranger. Someone needs to stand up for him. And in my family, that's fallen on my shoulders, I feel. So, who broke that contract? Not to put soldiers in harm's way without just cause. George Bush Jr. did, and everyone who executed that war. And that's why we're having this discussion, because it's a discussion that needs to be had. And you can't avoid it. You know, it's a discussion that's been delayed, but it needs to be had. That's as good a place as any. Stop. And then 24 out of 41. Let's knock this out. One more hour today.